The modern British financial empire is trying to destroy Donald Trump by drawing him into a new war. That is against his most fundamental promise to the American people, ending the forever wars. The press this morning is filled with the common media take. This is yet another war in the Middle East, which is normal there. And Trump is siding with Israel, which is what we do. Oh, and by the way, he promised peace, but he's now failed even in that. But the real story is just the opposite. Trump has been reordering the entire Middle East based on our national interests and the sovereign interests of the nations there. He's allied with Vladimir Putin in doing that. So the British Imperium is using its pawns in Israel, Iran, and Ukraine, and right here in the United States in a desperate attempt to destroy both Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin. I'm Barbara Boyd. I worked with Lyndon LaRouche for decades. He predicted 9/11, and we opposed the Iraq War before it even started. We identified the perpetrators and campaigned to disempower them. Our work brought us right up against the modern British financial empire and all their playbooks and assets. So I do know a little bit about what I'm talking about here. In this Saturday wrap, I'm going to first sketch the strategic context for Israel's attack and its real target, the emerging Trump Putin alliance. We'll look at the historical British great game in the Middle East and Eurasia, aimed at both Russia and the United States, with the countries of that region but pawns on a bigger chessboard. Then I'm going to discuss President Trump's vision of a new Middle East, independent of the mess in Israel, identify the warmongers pushing World War III, and end by telling you how to stop it. Let's start with Israel's sudden attack on Iran, right as critical peace talks here were about to begin this Sunday in Oman. Trump has known about Israel's plan for some time and opposed it, but he could not stop it without Iran showing some actual progress to peace in the negotiations and Israel basically holding back. Iran is heavily infiltrated, not just by the Mossad, but by the British intelligence forces, which brought the Ayatollahs into power in 1979. The official story? While Israel claims it is acting in self-defense, their real goal, stated over and over again, is regime change in Iran. And as opposed to the past innumerable Israeli fake claims about Iran developing the bomb, it does appear that Iran was seeking to enrich uranium to an extent not required for peaceful nuclear power. That's why President Trump set a deadline on the peace talks and told the Iranian hardliners openly that if they did not do a deal, all hell would break loose. But President Trump did not greenlight this attack and used the peace negotiations as a clever ruse. The Israelis trying to pull the U.S. into a new Middle East war are incessantly saying that that's what happened. He did not do that. He did not deceive Iran and the world on behalf of Israel. That false claim will make anyone negotiating with Trump distrust him forever. Trust is the central element of the personal relationships which determine peace or war. The Russians aren't falling for that. At the United Nations on Friday, the Russians pointed to the British, saying the British bases on Cyprus were secretly used to house the Israeli warplanes for the attack. Why does this matter? Because this attack didn't just target Iran, it clearly targets the very possibility of peace. It's eerily similar to Ukraine's Operation Spiderweb, which struck Russia's nuclear bombers and derailed peace negotiations just 2 weeks ago. In both cases, the timing was no accident. Here's where things get interesting. The Middle East has been the cauldron of British imperial war for decades. The October 7th terror attack by the Muslim Brotherhood-controlled Hamas was a direct attack on Trump's Abraham Accords, forcing a predictable savage response by the Israelis. Many inside Israel blamed Israel's longtime covert support of Hamas for the attacks and the hostage-taking. Netanyahu's coalition is weak and shaky as a result. His militarily devastating warfare in the Middle East has one goal: uniting a very divided Israeli population behind his leadership. Now, the Israelis are very good at killing people. They are terrible at finding the path to peace which ends the war. That's why President Trump intervened. Iran, for its part, has been an open terrorist war with Israel and other forces in the Middle East for years and remains intent on Israel's destruction. But there's another layer, the shadow of British imperial strategy. For centuries, the British great game has been played in this region with the goal of controlling and looting Eurasia and the crossroads countries of the Middle East. This isn't conspiracy, it's history, and it's playing out in real time. Let's dig deeper. Most people think the Middle East endless wars are just about religion or oil, but the real story is older and far more calculated. The British Empire once openly dominated this entire region. They perfected the art of divide and rule using proxy wars, coups, and control of terrorist operations like ISIS and Al Qaeda to keep rivals destabilized and dependent. Their biggest gambit is religious war, the type of war it is hardest to stop. Every time a secular nationalist government appeared in this area, it was overthrown or corrupted and replaced. Political Islam has been a pawn in the so called Great Game, always under British sponsorship. Let's just take Iran as an example. In 1953, British intelligence helped overthrow the nationalist and secular Prime Minister Mossadegh, installing the authoritarian Shah. He suppressed his population and did what his Anglo-American masters wanted. In 1979, they backed the Ayatollahs against the Shah, using the BBC to broadcast revolutionary propaganda. Even today, British linked networks have deep influence in Iran's power structure. What about Israel? Netanyahu and his now settler alliance coalition partners are radical revisionist Zionists, believers in the religious supremacy creed first set forth by Zev Jabotinsky, who was a direct British intelligence agent. Why does this matter now? Because Trump has campaigned to break this cycle, and along with it, the predatory globalist financial order installed after the fall of the Berlin Wall. As he has said this week, there was a genuine momentum toward peace in Ukraine until the British and Ukrainians conducted Operation Spiderweb, attacking Russia's nuclear fleet. Trump had brought about peace to the Middle East with his Abraham Accords in his first term. Now he was on the verge of doing that again, with the Gulf states cooperating and Russia helping to bring Iran on board. That's when Israel attacked, with their neocon allies here and the British government demanding it and in full support. Now here's the twist no one is talking about. Over the first 5 months of his second term, President Trump has launched a new agenda for the Middle East, one based on economic development, national sovereignty, and direct negotiations. He ended attacks on the Houthis, lifted sanctions on Syria, and opened talks with Hamas and Iran. Most importantly, he's made it clear U.S. interests come first, not Israel's. But the real breakthrough was the growing partnership between Trump and Putin. In their recent phone call, both leaders agreed Iran cannot have a nuclear weapon, and Putin said he would help bring Iran to the table. Russia happens to control Iran's nuclear fuel cycle. They have resisted Iran's offensive nuclear ambitions. Without Russian cooperation, these ambitions won't be reborn. And with the US and Russia aligned, there's a real chance for a new security architecture, one that could finally end the empire's forever war racket once and for all. So who's actually pushing war? It's not just the obvious players. Yes, there are crazies in both Israel and Iran. In the US, there are the traitors to President Trump's agenda, parading as his best friends. Senators Lindsey Graham and Tom Cotton, and other rhinos in the Senate, the empire's Fox News, Mark Levin, and other radical Zionists, Mike Pompeo, and other deep state players. All of them have used Iran's civilian use of nuclear power for years to provoke hysteria while pursuing their goal of regime change in Iran and throughout the Middle East. Donald Trump has repeatedly denounced their operations, starting with the Iraq War. But behind them are the globalist networks, the same British-linked interests that have manipulated wars here for generations. Generations are mowed down only to produce an angry new generation seeking revenge for their ancestors' killing. Trump's budding partnership for peace with Russia has them chewing the rug, pushing anything and everything to prevent fruition of that potential alliance for peace. That includes unleashing their terrorists against Americans in the region and here, drawing us into the war. Trump and Putin share one goal: end the forever wars, restore the sovereignty of nation states, and build a new system based on economic growth and stability. It's a very high-stakes moment, and the outcome is far from certain. But for the first time in a generation, there's a real path to peace if the right choices are made now. At the end of the evening Friday, and as of this morning, Iran and Israel are lobbing missiles at one another in an escalating war. Russia, the White House, India, China, and other key players are telling Iran to get to the table and resolve the issue with President Trump. As of yet, U.S. forces in the Middle East have not been attacked, but al-Qaeda is already threatening them, and if the U.S. escalates its support for Israel, the British plan will reach its apex. The neocon warhawks are campaigning hard to get President Trump back on the forever war train, not just by joining Israel in its regime change operations in Iran, but also with respect to the killing field in Ukraine's war with Russia. They need to be identified and driven out of Trump's new Republican Party. Additionally, the president has to look at all unsanctioned actions by our intelligence agencies or military in supporting Israel's attack. So what does all this mean for you? Well, we have to help President Trump thread the very high-stakes needle at play here. The red line is direct American involvement in this war, the goal the modern British Empire wants. The fake Trump supporters in the Republican House caucus and in the Senate who live on these forever wars have to hear your condemnation of them now. The same congressmen and senators who support the Ukraine war support the United States joining Israel's war with Iran. Just look up the Ukraine caucus in the House and the Senate. Our citizens must align with President Trump's war for peace and shut these people down. Now, if you found this breakdown valuable, share it with someone who wants to hear the real story. We are now at 480 paid members to Promethean Action. That's where we are on the way to our 1,000 paid member goal. We have many, many more unpaid members, which we'd like you to convert. You guys are responding fantastically, but we need this growth drive to continue so that we can make these briefings daily. The briefing I just gave you underlines, I hope, our unique contribution. I'd like you to go to Promethean Action to contribute as much as you possibly can now. On Monday, I'll be back to summarize developments in what is shaping up to be a very tense and determinative weekend in America's June. Stay informed, stay courageous, and as always, keep looking beneath the surface for the truth.
Thanks for watching. Please take a moment and subscribe to our free newsletter at prometheanaction.com.